Good morning. It's Market Day Report. We're glad you're with us to start another trading day. All right, before the markets open, we're still, about 14 minutes away from the open. Let's see what happened in the overnight session. We'll start with the corn market, which overnight went a couple of pennies higher on that D's contract, but a penny higher on the March at 444 and a half. How about the soybean trade? Well, beans in the overnight session, January up 11.19 and 3/4, gains pretty much across the board as well. Now, we've seen some pressure in soy meal contracts, but gains in the overnight session, and then we have bean oil contracts. And again, that's been the shining star of this complex throughout the year, but a pullback that started yesterday and continued into the overnight session, and we're seeing 51 cents on both December and January. What about the wheat markets before we get to our next guest? Well, the wheat market, Chicago, new crop July, penny and a half lower, 551 and a half. Hard red, down 3 on the July at 550 and a half. And the cotton market in the overnight session, March unchanged at 64.46. You know, our special guest is the president of Midwest Market Solutions. It's Brian Hoops. Brian, welcome back. Let's jump in here. What catches your attention as we start the trade? Well, we don't have Brian's audio yet, but we'll come back to that in just a moment. Now, we do have a report coming out from USDA. That's a World Ag Supply Demand Estimates report. It's set to come out on Tuesday. Sorry about that. It comes out on Tuesday at 12 o'clock Eastern. The big question at this point is whether or not we'll get some revisions. Normally, it's a quiet report from USDA, but with the government shutdown, will we see some revisions in this report? If we do, could be a market mover. And week from tomorrow, we get a cattle on feed report as well. Speaking of cattle, how about we take a quick break, and when we come back in a moment, we'll look at that cattle market. We'll also jaunt over and look at the equity markets, what's happening with the Dow, NASDAQ, and the S&P in front of that FOMC meeting next week. Market Day Report continues in a moment. All right, let's look at the cattle market. And, we did see some moves higher in that cattle market yesterday. What about today? What could we see? Well, let's back up. Live cattle futures yesterday settling the session. That D's contract gained a half buck to 218.97, $1.15 higher on the February at 221.95. Over to the feeders. And again, feeders moving higher in that session. We've been higher for 2 straight sessions in this feeder market. January up $1.85, 331.72 in the March, $1.75 higher, 325.67. Hog trade yesterday was higher. After a day lower on Tuesday, we gained 70 on the February at 80.87. Let's bring him back in. Brian Hoops, Midwest Market Solutions. Brian, what are you watching here today?
Well, hopefully we got the technology all figured out, Tony. So we'll go back to the corn for a second. We were expecting to see export sale announcements of soybeans because we've been hearing rumors China's been buying soybeans from the U.S. and it wasn't announced this morning, but we did have corn sales. 109,000 sold to Colombia, 392,000 corn sold to Mexico. So some good corn sales that were released this morning might be a little supportive to that market to finally get some export business. Stats Canada was out this morning, and their estimates for production for wheat well above expectations and 3 million metric tons larger than what they had expected back in September. So that wheat crop really doesn't need any more bad news, but we received it anyway this morning. A lot of production around the world, Canada, Australia, Ukraine and Russia, Argentina, all having bigger wheat crops. The U.S. included has a bigger wheat crop than the previous year, and it's going to be hard to sustain rallies, I'm afraid, there. In the soybean market, we are higher overnight, hoping for some export business, I think. There's a little concerns about some comments from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent that he made yesterday. He mentioned that China would fulfill their trade agreement or buy their 12 million metric tons by the end of February. We had always been told it was going to be done by the end of 2025. The trade has been expecting that they would buy those 12 million tons here by the end of December. His comments yesterday suggest that that's not going to be the case, that they're going to delay those purchases maybe a couple more months. And so it has a lot of the trade wondering about the validity of this trade agreement. The cattle market here, feels like it wants to move higher. I think we've been higher 5 out of the last 6 sessions. We're breaking some technical barriers as far as resistance points, as far as downtrend lines, moving averages, that sort of thing. And that's starting to attract some of the fund-related buying. It's the funds that really sold this market off, all their funds selling. And now that maybe they're out of this sell mode and the technicals are improving, we can get them back into the buy mode and see some gains because the fundamentals are not all that bad. We had cutouts down the other day, but they were up last night once again. So we're trying to see a little bit of a trending higher in cutouts. Still looking for that cash trade. There was some bids on the exchange auction yesterday at 220. Asking prices were that 222 range, and there was no trade. So we're still have that standoff out in the country looking for some cash trade develop, which may not occur until sometime on Friday.
Yeah, good points there. Brian, as you were talking about Scott Bessent's comments on coming in, the purchases from China before February, got me thinking the new year, the Chinese New Year doesn't really correspond with our New Year. So could it be that we were talking about China's year and not ours?
Well, it would be unusual if our president and the White House and Secretary Rollins were talking about the Chinese New Year without clarifying it. I think they were, they were pretty clear it was going to be the end of 2025. That's what the traders believe. But anything is possible. Maybe it will be the Chinese New Year, and maybe that's what China's going off of. I don't know.
Okay. Well, Brian, it's great to see you. Brian Hoops is with Midwest Market Solutions.